So thank you everyone for coming to this solidarity rally with NHS staff, which we've called as a response to the announcement last week by Rishi Sunak that NHS staff are going to be offered a 1% pay rise in this year's pay round. We decided to call this rally through NEU districts because we could see the outrage not just amongst NHS staff about that announcement, but amongst NEU members also. NEU members have witnessed, I'm sure we've all witnessed firsthand what the NEU members have witnessed firsthand what NHS staff have been through over the last year. Some of us, up very close to it, others maybe a disconnection from it, but we've seen what they've done, and I think we have all been in awe of what NHS staff have done for us in the last year. You know, whatever we've been through in schools, I think we're aware that NHS staff have been really on the front line in dealing with the pandemic and everything that's come out as a result of it. At the beginning, struggling to get proper PPE equipment, and then just dealing with the fallout from the rising death toll and the government's mishandling of the whole situation. I've been told today that 850 NHS staff have died in the last year as a result of COVID. Many of them didn't have the proper PPE equipment when they were having to support people who contracted the virus. And now I think we are in awe of what they're doing around the vaccination program, which is going very, very well. And I think shows us that when you trust the NHS and you give them the resources, they deliver for us on a mass scale. And I say, the NHS staff should be applauded, but they should be rewarded and not insulted with this 1% pay award. We've got a great panel of speakers today, and I'm really grateful to all of them for giving up their time to come and talk to us tonight. They're going to talk to us about the work they've been doing in the last year, what the reaction in their workplaces has been to the 1% pay offer, and they're going to outline some things that we can do if we're NEU members in schools and local areas to support their campaign and show some unity on it. And I'm very grateful to Helen Watson, who is the head of communications at the NEU, who's put me in touch with Julia and other people and enabled us to get together this great spread of speakers that you're going to hear from. So we're going to hear from 6 speakers. We've also got Kevin Courtney, our Joint General Secretary, who's going to speak, and later in the meeting we're going to be joined by Karen Reisman, who will talk to you about the protests that she organised in Manchester and the fact that she was fined £10,000 for doing that, and Karen will tell us about what's happening around that and what we can do to support her. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Mel Gale, who's a GMB rep and a nurse from Glasgow, as our first speaker. So.
Hello everybody. Firstly I'd like to thank the NEU for asking me along tonight for this rally. I am really truly privileged. I'm amongst some really very, very good speakers about the NHS, and they're passionate and their way forward, so I do thank you. My name is Melanie Gale. I am a GMB rep. I'm also a nurse in Glasgow. I have been a nurse now for over 20 years within the NHS. For me, when the 1% was announced, I was absolutely infuriated. I was so annoyed that the government could actually think that 1% was a decent amount to offer NHS workers. It's a disgrace, it's disgusting. How dare they actually think that's acceptable, which it's not. I'm annoyed with the government for the fact is that they say they can't afford to do this. They say they can't afford to pay us a decent pay rise, well, a restorative pay increase, we should say. For over the past 10 years, we have not had a decent pay rise. Every time they put an announcement out to say this is what we're getting, We don't get it because inflation goes up and we lose out. Why should a newly qualified Band 5 walk out with £25,000 a year for having to do 3 years worth of studying to gain their qualifications, to gain there? But this is a fight for all NHS workers, let's be honest. The government failed to lock us down in time to save this country. The government failed to give us proper equipment for PPE, where our staff are walking around with bin bags to ensure that they're covered. The mask that we've got to wear means nothing. It's not acceptable. We have lost over 120,000 people in this country alone. That's nothing to be proud of. That is a disgrace. But yet again, they expect NHS workers to stand in the forefront and just stand there and do their job. Well, back to you, Mr. Johnson. No, we're not. We deserve a restorative pay rise. We deserve to be recognised for what we do. And I mean all NHS workers. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you're a porter, catering, domestic, OT, speech and language, nurse, doctor. It doesn't matter. We deserve to be paid for it. This government continues to put a divide on the public sector. They're continuously making out that as public sector workers and pinning us against each other. Why would you do that for? We need to stand in solidarity with all public sector workers. We all deserve to be recognised and made to feel that we're worth something. We need to stand together to be united. We stand together, we're stronger as a team together. I have worked throughout the pandemic. I ran a COVID positive ward. I know what that's like. It's not nice. It's heart-wrenching. You're having to make sure your patients are kept safe, and you're having to phone families to let them know how poorly they are. You don't have the proper equipment. You're not properly supported. There's not enough staff on the floors to help out. Why is there not enough staff on the floors to help out? Because NHS is not attractive, is it? Who would want to come in and work in for what we get? So to be offered a 1% pay deal, no, not happening. It's been an absolute shambles. We are tired, we are burnt out, we are broken. We deserve to be respected for the jobs that we all do within the NHS. We deserve that restorative pay increase. We deserve to be respected, and we're never going to get that. We have had to adapt and change every single time throughout this whole year to make sure that we provide the care for your loved ones. We can't survive in the NHS if this continues to happen. We are underfunded, lack of resources. Pay us, make it more attractive. Let's get people in that want to be proud of their NHS, that wants to help, that wants to be part of something that's so great. NHS, the reason it started was to make sure that it was free to the point of delivery. Where's this free to the point of delivery? They are constantly bringing us down, constantly destroying our NHS. We work hard in our NHS. Our NHS deserves to be saved. We've worked on that front line. We need the public to publicly support us and get behind us, because one day our NHS might not be there. I've said I'm a GMB rep. GMB at the present moment have done a lot of campaigns out, especially through the social media, about the 15% and £18 an hour, whatever is greater. And we're constantly out there supporting. We are supporting our members. But what I will say tonight is, please get in a union. Please make your voices be heard. Please get out there. We're never going to win this if we don't all stick together. I am not bothered what union anybody's involved in, but see, when we stand together and fight together, we're going to win this. So what I say about your 1%, Boris, no thank you. We're going to win a restorative pay increase, and we're going to get it, and we're going to show them that we're worth more. Can I say thank you so much? And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mel. That's a great start to the meeting. I can see people applauding with their real hands or their virtual hands. And you can count on support from NEU members all around the country. So thank you very much for kicking us off. I'm going to go straight to our next speaker, who's Tammy Galston. who's a Unite member and a healthcare assistant in the Midlands. Tammy, if you unmute yourself.
Hi folks, thanks for inviting me. I'm a Band 2 healthcare assistant in a hospital in the Midlands. I care for adults with challenging behaviour. I've worked all over the NHS, however, in learning disabilities, mental health, on a dialysis unit, in theatres and as an admin assistant. All of these jobs were at Bands 2 and 3, the bottom end of the pay scale, but they were all essential. As healthcare assistants, that's what I do at the moment. We do the everyday patient care that your relatives, that your loved ones require. We feed everyone. We keep everyone clean. We do other essential jobs such as set up your dialysis equipment or machine. We set up sterile trolleys for nurses. We weigh patients. We restock cupboards. We make beds. We update patient records. We escort, transfer and mobilise patients. We run errands for nurses, we run clinics, we reassure your relatives in their hour of need, and we deal with aggressive patients, which is what my job is. So I've cared for people, I care for people with challenging behaviour, as I said. So often that's patients with dementia. So if they're in a COVID isolation room or isolation bay with other patients, I have to keep them in there in as humane and reasonable way as possible with very little to entertain them. They might want to go for a walk in the corridor. I have to find ways to pacify them and keep them calm and keep them happy. That's important to me. And during the second wave, I was finally given my own pair of goggles. Previous to that, I had, the usual diabolical surgical mask, appalling plastic apron, PPE that was insufficient and unsafe for the kind of people that I have to deal with as patients, people who might attack me. And the team that I work on, that's the kind of job that we're doing. So throughout this pandemic, we've spent 12-hour shifts in this inadequate PPE, in COVID isolation rooms and bays, caring for those who are infected and dying. We've put our own health and safety at risk, and you can see why we might regard a 1% pay rise as an insult. The last year has taken a huge toll on our mental and physical health, and anger over this 1% is high. As I say, we care for people who are sick and dying, and we do it in as humane and kind a way as possible. And we run around, we run off our feet, and we're often, as I say, spending 12 hours in a COVID bay. We can't go out just like that to go to the bathroom. We're stuck in there. On a weekday, a Band 2 HCA would be paid just over £9 an hour. We also get enhancements for antisocial hours, but that's because we work nights, weekends, bank holidays, and we give up our Christmas Day quite often to care for your loved ones, and we take that seriously. None of us are earning anything like 34,000 a year that the press calls an average nurse's wage. We're earning close to 20,000 a year, and that's why this pay rise matters to all of us throughout the pay scale. I haven't been on holiday for around 4 years because I can't afford it. A pay rise, a restorative pay rise, as that's what it would be, would enable the NHS to recruit more staff and maintain safe staffing levels. In my trust, on any one day, there may be 40 unfulfilled early shifts for HCAs on our bank 0 hours rostering system. As you can imagine, this causes huge pressure on nursing staff when these shift vacancies remain unfilled, and combine that with a lack of permanent HCA staff. So those HCAs who are at work are also under huge pressure. They might be caring for, most of a area of people. So that could be between 12 and 20 people. Without a pay rise, hospitals will struggle to recruit HCAs and support staff. This will mean that nurses end up doing our jobs as well as their own, and that's to add to the pressure caused by chronic understaffing. There are currently around 100,000 nursing posts vacant in the NHS. The current government have now spent 37 billion on their failed test, track and trace project. A 15% pay rise for NHS staff would cost a lot less than £37 billion, and it would provide a lot more value for money. Instead, the government is trying to privatise the A&E unit at York Hospital. They're closing services in Epsom in North London, and they're cutting £30 billion in everyday NHS spending, while around 250,000 people are on a waiting list for surgery. As NHS staff, we need to be prepared to take action to get a restorative pay rise, but also to maintain patient safety and protect the NHS from the existential threat that is this government. Support us by getting involved in your local NHS campaign and by encouraging NHS workers that you know to join a union. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Tammy, for that. Another round of applause I can see, and it's so great to hear from frontline NHS staff about what you've been through, which really just underlines, you know, how insulting this offer is. I think what we will be encouraging NEU branches to do is to hold meetings and to invite speakers. So I think all our speakers can expect more invitations to speak at meetings as your campaign develops. I'm going to go straight to our next speaker, who is Sahala Musa, an RCN member and part of an organisation called Nurses United Nurses of Colour Network. Sahala, if you unmute yourself, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, thanks, Alex. Hi, all. Hard to follow two amazing speakers that were before me, but my name is Sahala and I am a children's nurse in London and one of the members of the Nurses United's Nurses of Colour Network and an RCN member. During this pandemic, things have been hard for everyone, especially for frontline nurses. I've met nurses who are frontliners who have had their loved ones pass away and still show up to work. They're there caring for others whilst dealing with their own personal struggles. This alleged 1% pay rise not only affects nurses, but all NHS workers. During this pandemic, the health and social injustices have been brought to the forefront, and one of them is the pandemic of racism, which has existed long before COVID-19. We had people who didn't have the right PPE because it was tested on white infection control nurses. We had people of colour move to work on hot wards because of the systemic racism that exists in our NHS. Is it any wonder that so many people of colour died? Over 850 health and social care workers have died. A large proportion of that number are frontline workers that identify as people of colour. When over 20% of nurses are people of colour and only 8% are senior managers, it is obvious that there is institutional racism within our NHS. We have a race pay gap, and it is obvious that this 1% pay rise will only make this worse. If we are going to fight for pay justice, we need to fight for racial justice. 55% of all nurses in London are people of colour, and we will continue to lose nurses if we treat them like crap. Some of our members weekly, when we meet up, have shared stories. One of our regular nurses that attends, she was a senior nurse. She applied for a band 6 and she got a band 6. And someone that was qualified less than her and less experienced was actually being paid more than her for the same exact role that they do. So just because she was a brown person, she was being paid less than another nurse when they were both promoted at the same time, except the nurse from the Caribbean background, who was mixed race, was basically more experienced. Another nurse had a fellow colleague, another nurse, be racist towards her, and it took 3 months for her to hear of an outcome. I've had constant microaggressions at work. From a previous workplace that I worked at, you see people treat you differently, they speak to you differently, all because of the colour of your skin. And it's really difficult to explain how one feels when you have it done to you so much. You start to think, is there something wrong with me? What have I done to deserve this? And it's slightly concerning. And it's because of this continuous hierarchy that we have in the NHS that so many nurses of colour feel like they can't speak out. And it's no wonder that so many of us have passed away. A large proportion of the nurses that have passed away have been from a Filipino background and from a Black and Asian ethnic minority background. If we don't address both the racism and the racial pay gap, we will never solve it. And that is why next week, as part of the Nurses of Colour Network, we're launching our racism reporting tour on the 17th of March at 7 p.m.
That's great. Thank you so much. If you put the link for that, or if you send me the details of that, Sahala, we can circulate. There you are. It's already there in the link. So take that link away and see what you can do and have a look at that. That's really shocking figures you gave us there, Sahala, and great to see that nurses of colour are working together and organising around racism in the NHS, which we're trying to do in education as well. Our Black educators. So thank you for that that insight to that. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is a nurse from Lincolnshire. We're moving around the country, you see. Lincolnshire is Mel Kerr.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me tonight. So I'm Mel, I'm a nurse, and thank you so much for having me to speak on this amazing panel in a personal capacity as a passionate RCN member. Day in, day out, we have all seen throughout this crisis how important our NHS workers on the front lines are for our health and well-being. I came into nursing to make a difference to people's lives, to care for them when they needed help, and to be there in their last moments. I work primarily in an educational role, so I train people to respond to a crisis, but nothing could have prepared us for what this pandemic would be like. And that's why it's so shameful that this government decided to inflict yet another crisis upon my patients and my health service with this disgraceful 1% pay offer. Nurses and this government know that if you cut our pay, it creates vacancies that put our patient safety at risk. The average nurse's salary has dropped by 20% since 2010, and the result is 40,000 vacancies. With over half of nurses a decade away from being able to take early retirement, and a third of nurses feeling like they want to leave the profession because of how we've been treated, is now the time to give our NHS staff or our educators such a kick in the teeth? I am a nurse, and I can tell you now, not if I have anything to say about it. And the same is true if you ask my union and our members within the RCN. Times are changing. Gone are the days when nurses would sit by and take whatever they were offered by this government. We are a safety critical profession, and we're getting organised, speaking to each other and doing the work of building to ensure that no matter who you are, if you put our patients at risk, we will stand against you. I'm so proud when I saw the £35 million strike fund announced, and more is yet to come. We are serious about doing what needs to be done to protect ourselves and our colleagues. And that's why what we need you to do is to step up too. We are your nurses, and this is your NHS. So support us by speaking to every NHS worker you know and asking them to join a union and update their details. You'd be surprised by how many you know. There's 1.6 million of us, so any help you can give to unionise them is greatly appreciated. And given that this is an NEU rally, please reach out and share your skills in organising with your local NHS workers. It's been a long time since NHS workers have been pushed into a position where we felt like we could take industrial action. And we need your experience and solidarity in this fight. Because when the teacher and nurse are united, they will never be defeated. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great way to end there. We will stand with you. We are united, and anything we can do to help practically or in solidarity, we'll be there. A lot of our schools, a lot of our districts are having Zoom meetings, so it's very easy to invite people in for a Zoom meeting. You don't have to travel. So I hope you're standing by, Mel and Sahala and Tammy and Mel, to join some of our meetings, but you don't have to do it all. There's millions of you, aren't there? So I'm going to go to our next speaker, Julia Patterson, who's part of the Every Doctor campaign, and she's going to be followed by Alan Courtney, who's been working in an intensive care unit as an anaesthetist. So Julia.
Hello everybody, and thank you so much for supporting us tonight. Speaking after so many fantastic members of NHS staff feels a little bit daunting, actually. I feel quite moved by the stories that I've heard so far, and it's so fortifying to hear everybody's dedication and resolve about this campaign. I think NHS staff have waited years and years for an opportunity to speak up about this. The experiences during the pandemic have been horrifying. The stresses, the things that NHS staff have had to endure have been absolutely unbelievable. And yet we weren't in a good position when we came into the pandemic. I was part of the school cuts campaign before the 2019 general election. So I know that teachers will understand where we're coming from when we talk about cuts and austerity and things getting continually squeezed. It has just felt like it's been constant since 2010, to be perfectly honest. Myself and Alan are from a group of doctors, and we represent 1,700 frontline doctors. We obviously want to prioritise nurses and other staff members who don't earn as much as doctors. We recognise that there are other staff members who are struggling. But the reality going forward is that we are only going to have a strong NHS which supports staff and patients if we are able to recruit and retain staff at all different levels. And so this needs to be a campaign that helps everybody across the board. We're united with the nurses. We want to help as much as we possibly can, putting their voices to the forefront, because nurses in particular have been so let down over the previous decade. I'm not working frontline at the moment. I'm doing the kind of behind the scenes work for our organisation. So I'm going to hand over to Alan to talk a bit about what it's been like working as an anaesthetist or a trainee anaesthetist during the pandemic.
Thank you, Julia. Alan, if you unmute.
Hi, hello there. Thank you for having me. So yes, my name is Alan Courtney. I'm an anaesthetist trainee, and I've been redeployed to intensive care for both the waves of this pandemic. I do feel quite strongly about this pay rise issue, because I think my most memorable moment of COVID so far has been when a nursing colleague, and actually quite a close personal friend of quite a lot of the intensive care nurses, got admitted to our intensive care secondary to COVID infection. She was the sickest patient I've had to deal with COVID who has actually survived. And I think just the emotional toll, especially for the nursing staff who had to look after their friend and know how unwell she was, is just incalculable. I just had these intensive care nursing veterans of 20 or 30 years just come up to me with tears streaming down their face, just begging me to save their friend, as if I had some special powers. And what I was really struck by was how they would then just wipe their faces, put their personal protective equipment on, and then just go back in and finish their 13-hour shift. And then they'd come the next day and the next. And just the strength that they displayed was just awe-inspiring, really. But I did also see some of them who did struggle, and I speak to a few of them last night, and I still remember the night when one went off sick the next morning because she wasn't able to do the most basic of her function. She was just so crippled with stress and anxiety. And this was an ITU veteran of 30 plus years, so this wasn't her first rodeo, but she was just destroyed by just the mental health issues that this pandemic has brought on to the nursing profession. And she's back in work now, but she tells me when she comes to work, she comes in an extra 15 minutes early just to pray for that quarter of an hour in her car, because she just doesn't know what else to do. And she's telling me this with tears just streaming down her face. I think on a more general note, and I do know I have been talking about nursing staff in particular, but I do mean all the porters and the radiographers and the healthcare assistants and everyone. But you know, even nurses who would be perhaps, you know, on the better end of that scale, they all just, a huge number of them have to take extra shifts, almost on like a weekly basis, which just proves to me that they're not being paid enough. It's that, or having a side hustle. And so why are we having these university graduates, or a large majority of them, having to scrimp and save and work extra hours? I mean, that by definition shows that the profession isn't paying enough. And the numbers of them that have to use food banks and literally charities to survive, or working kind of a full-time job, it really does cause me to be outraged on a moral level, which I just can't express enough. But we're all part of you know, our own respective professions, and I do just think it is so important that we need to be paid like it. And that's why I don't think this 1% pay cut is anywhere near enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alan. I could feel that was quite hard for you to talk about that, and it's a really useful reminder that behind the figures there are human stories, not just of families losing loved ones, but NHS staff having to deal with that day in, day out for the last year. So thank you so much for that. I'm really delighted that our next speaker has she joined us? Karen, you are here. Karen Reisman is here. She'll be known to a lot of us as a stalwart campaigner down the years, not just for NHS staff, but for all, you know, loads of solidarity movements that Karen's been involved in. Karen will tell you about it herself, but on Saturday she organised, she's an NHS worker, and she organised a properly socially distanced demonstration in Manchester with masks and social distancing, again, you know, to show the protest against this 1% pay rise. And she was stopped by the police, and she was fined £10,000 as the organiser of the demo. I understand you've collected the money, Karen, but come in and tell us all about it. You're very, very welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thanks to everybody in the room, and thanks to everybody who isn't in the room who has supported me over the last 3 days. It's very daunting when you get a £10,000 fixed penalty notice. It's not like a parking ticket where you think, oh, £100, that's a bit mean. But £10,000, my jaw did drop, and I have to say the thought of having to sort of, you know, find that from somewhere or do whatever does fill you with dread, and it's intended to fill you with dread. And to get the overwhelming wave of solidarity where people who I've never met before in my life set up Go crowdfunders, and we've raised over the £10,000, which is enough to be able to challenge it. And I won't be paying the fine. I will be using that money to legally challenge the fine, because I do think it's important that we fight for the right to protest. We were protesting about the health service because, as people have said, the health service was in a no-fit state before COVID, and it is an even worse state now. And unless the government change its attitude towards health workers and begin to offer some solidarity and some genuine appreciation and respect for what people do, and for the health service as well, there will not be a health service. And I know the government don't care about that. If they run it down and it's destroyed, they've always got their private hospitals that they can afford to do. But it isn't the same for us. And that's why I thought it was important that we did protest. And really, I wasn't given the fine because what we did was unsafe. I'm a health worker who is full of health workers, and we run one of the safest sort of, you know, possible protests it was possible to have. I won't go through the details. You can see my risk assessment. Not that the police were interested in that, because they weren't interested. They were interested in it being illegal, and they were interested in stopping us do it. And I just think there's something wrong in the world where 40 health workers are deemed illegal, worth £10,000 fine, and yet it's perfectly legal the day later to send 10 million children back to school and to have outside every sort of school in the country, hundreds and hundreds of people not able to social distance, not having the precautions that we have. And that's not illegal, that's perfectly legal, even though the scientists say that that will lead to between 30 and 50,000 more deaths in the coming months. It's perfectly legal to have 24 million people who've gone to work in the last 3 months, who've been making emergency cars and building emergency buildings. And I just think not one of those businesses has been fined, not one of them has been forced to shut and gone to the point of prohibition notices. And I just think there is something wrong about the system that doesn't actually deal with the people who are doing the most unsafe things in the world, and yet they want to penalise somebody who isn't, who's trying to fight back. And I think when we saw a legal budget, perfectly legal, that enriches the rich and impoverishes the poor, that's perfectly legal, and we're supposed to just sit at home and maybe write them a quick email about it. And I do think that we've got to the stage now where I think that sort of, we need to say we cannot allow this government to carry on with its policies, and therefore we have to fight for the right to protest. We have to fight for the right to say no and to stop the government doing what they're doing. Interestingly, when Dominic Cummings went up to Durham on something that was clearly outside the rules and was risky, did put people at risk, he wasn't fined anything. But if he had been fined £10,000, that would have been 3 months of his pay rise. I'm fined £10,000 and it will take me 56 years of my 1% to pay that £10,000 fine. There's something really disproportionate in the way that we're paid and they're paid, and the way that we're fined and they're fined. And I just think that system has to stop. And I think we have to continue fight for the right to protest, because this government is far too deadly to be allowed to carry on. And that's why I will carry on protesting. I don't think it's always easy, but I will. I have just been, we take the knee in Hume where I live every week and have done for 40 weeks since George Floyd was murdered. And I went down again and did that again this week, because I think whether it's racism, whether it's the health service, whether it's the appalling things that they're doing to you as education workers, or the parents and children that you work with, it is outrageous that we live in a world that consistently puts profit before people, and we have to say no. And unfortunately, protesting is the only way that we can say no. I said at the end of my speech, if they won't let me protest, maybe we have to go out on strike. But actually, I think we have to do both, because this government has to be stopped.
Thank you so much for that, Karen. If you let us know when you're in court, we'll come and do a socially distanced protest outside, and let's see what happens. No, seriously, do let us know whatever we can do, to help that campaign, that particular part of the campaign.
Really appreciated, really, Alex. Thank you very, very much. The NEU have been fantastic. Thank you. We'll be there for you. I'm going to introduce our last speaker in a minute, but I put in the chat, I think from tonight, I suggest for NEU members that we set up educators for our NHS group and meet again soon and think about what we can do, how we can build out from this meeting to support the health unions in this campaign. But our final speaker tonight, and we've established that he's no relation to Alan. It's probably the first time we've had two Courtneys on a platform, but I'm really pleased, and it's really important that we do have Kevin here tonight, Joint General Secretary of the NEU. Over to you, Kevin.
Oh, thank you, Alex. And can I just start by saying thank you to you and the London districts of the NEU for organising this meeting. It's a really important initiative, and initiatives get taken by individuals. It's really good that you took that initiative. And the speakers on this have been absolutely fantastic. Melanie, Tammy, Sahala, Mel, Julia, Karen, Alan, you are fantastic speakers. And I think if we record this and get that out to people, hearing the stories that you've told us, it really matters. People know how much NHS workers have given, but hearing you say it about being in your PPE for 12 hours, having to deal with people in the circumstances you talked about, it's really important that you've done that. There are NEU members from all over the country on this call, and I think we can therefore use it in the way that Alex has just talked about as a springboard to lots more organisation. And I want to say, and I just feel just to feel a real degree of confidence in saying this, that every working person in our country knows that they owe a debt of gratitude to every NHS worker. We feel it. We owe you that debt of gratitude. Nurses, doctors, ancillary workers, healthcare assistants, the cleaners, we know that we need you. And we are outraged. And I think this is every working person in the country is outraged by the way the government is treating you. And when we hear those stories, you know, that first time round when you had no PPE and you were still there putting your lives at risk, when we saw those first pictures of doctors and nurses dying, often our black brothers and sisters dying first in that situation, and teachers were putting their, and support assistants putting their lives a little bit at risk to keep key workers, children being educated, so NHS workers could stay at work, but nothing like what you were going through. In that first lockdown, we had design and technology teachers going into school in order to make visors, and it was great that they were doing that, and absolutely outrageous that they would be in a position, you would be in a position where you didn't have a visor, and a design and technology teacher could make a tiny contribution to this. And I think it is really important also to reflect on other people, because Boris Johnson, and I don't want to, you know, I don't want to be, this isn't party political, but Boris Johnson, as the Prime Minister of the country, when the pandemic was starting, he said he was going to carry on shaking hands with people. Then he didn't go into lockdown when scientists were telling him he should go into lockdown. We went in 2 or 3 weeks too late, and that peak was so much higher. So many more people died because of that. Then we stayed in lockdown. We didn't stay in long enough to get the cases down. We didn't get test, track, trace. He didn't get test, track, trace set up, and he went with a privatized model instead of building on the local public health teams. And then NHS workers kept him alive in that hospital. And you kept him alive, and it's the right thing to do. NHS workers keep everybody alive. It's the right thing to do. But and then he organises, then he's part of the clap for the NHS. Well, bloody good on him. But claps don't put any food on the table for anybody. And I think that's a common feeling for working people, for educators, and for NHS staff, and for everybody else in our country. So the vital question is, what are we going to do about it? And I think coming out of today, we want every NEU branch in the country to contact their local hospital, to contact the unions there, the RCN, the GMB, Unison, the doctors' unions, whatever unions that they can get in touch with. And we want to plan concrete solidarity actions. This cannot stand. We cannot let the government cut NHS pay. And let's face it, a 1% cut, a 1% pay rise is another cut, and that is not the respect that is due to NHS workers after what they've been through. It's not right for any worker. There shouldn't be a public sector pay freeze. Public sector workers, when they get paid, they spend their money in private sector shops. This is really false economics, but we have to absolutely say it cannot stand for NHS workers, for any NHS worker. This must not stand. And I think we mustn't have short memories. We've got to remember the way Boris Johnson mishandled this crisis, but we've also got to go back to 2010, when George Osborne told us that the way they were going to deal with the crisis then was, we're all in it together, he said. And then, after saying we're all in it together, then they trebled tuition fees, they cut pensions, they cut local services, they ran down the NHS, they bailed out the bankers, and that wasn't all in it together. And whichever one of you said nurses and teachers united, and NHS workers and educationists united, that's the all in it together. Working people, we are all in it together, and we all have to say this NHS pay cut will not stand. And every NEU branch should contact NHS union branches everywhere. We have to reach out to other unions. We want the massive mobilisation. You shouldn't have to strike. The government should fall down now. They should give way. They should admit error. There should be a proper restitution of your pay across that 20% that you've been talking about that's been cut. If you have to strike, we will be there to support you, like we were there to support the junior doctors. But this time, the government is not going to get away with it. The people of this country will not allow this government to cut your pay in this way. Thank you so much for everything you have done for us, for our relatives, for our brothers and sisters. You have got us through this more than any other people. We now know who the key workers are in our country. And thank you very much for everything you've done. Thanks again to Alex for organising this meeting. You have to take a step from this meeting. You have to do something to organise. It's not good enough to come to this meeting. You have to take a concrete next step about what you're going to do to organise and make a bigger protest. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much for that, Kevin. And we're going to take that message away. Colleagues, I've just noticed in the chat that this is an international meeting. We've been joined by a good friend of ours, Layla Uni, who's working in a refugee camp in the Lebanon. So, Layla, do you want to say something or say hello?
Yes, I'm sorry, I can't put my camera on because of the internet is quite weak in here. I'm sending you solidarity from Lebanon. I'm currently based there, working with MSF in refugee camps. Indeed, as I said, health workers are overworked and overlooked everywhere all over the world, and we shouldn't accept this. We should stand together and support each other in solidarity with you all. Thank you so much for this meeting.
Thank you, Layla. Thank you for that. So, colleagues, we've got some takeaways from tonight. There's a slow hand clap tomorrow that health unions are organising. If we're in school tomorrow, get some staff together, take a photo of them holding up "We like our NHS" or 1% pay insult, make up a sign, get that on Twitter and social media to support the slow hand clap tomorrow. If you go back to your districts, organise a speaker, get in touch with us if you want help getting a speaker. I think we're building up some good connections from here. And I'll email out any of you members that have been here tonight and see if we can call a meeting soon and talk about how we build that solidarity, how we can organise events in conjunction with health unions around hospitals, shopping areas. Their fight is our fight, as Kevin said. So what I'm going to suggest now is that you all unmute yourselves and you give a round of applause to Mel, Tammy, Sahala, Mel, Julia, Alan, and Karen, Layla, and Kevin, and give everybody a round of applause.
Solidarity.
Thank you.